The first tremor hit at 11:59:47 a.m. It was imperceptible to anyone else on the corporate jet, a faint vibration that was easily mistaken for the hum of the powerful engines spooling up for takeoff. But Alistair Finch felt it. He felt everything. His world was a finely calibrated machine of cause and effect, of schedules and seconds. He glanced at the watch on his wrist, a symphony of platinum and sapphire crystal. The Eleanor chronometer, a one-of-a-kind masterpiece his late wife had designed. It was perfect. It was always perfect. Yet a ghost of a vibration had just run through the fuselage, a discordant note in the prelude to his departure. His flight to Tokyo was timed to the second, a crucial meeting that would secure a multi-billion-dollar merger. Everything was accounted for. "Mister, your watch is wrong." The voice was small, a child's whisper that somehow cut through the engine noise. Alistair looked up from his watch, his irritation a cold, sharp spike. A little girl stood in the aisle, no older than 7, her dress a faded, patched-up thing, her face smudged with dirt. She must have been the cleaner's child, somehow wandered on board. She pointed a small, grimy finger at his wrist. "It's wrong," she repeated, her gaze not on him, but locked on the complex whirring gears visible through the watch's skeletal face. "It's singing the wrong song." Alistair's jaw tightened. The audacity! His watch was a marvel of horological engineering, accurate to within a second per decade. "The watch is correct," he said, his voice clipped and cold. "You need to leave. Now." He pressed the call button for his flight attendant. A moment's delay, an unscheduled variable. It was infuriating. Security would be here in a moment. But as the girl was gently led away, her words echoed in his mind, nonsensical and yet strangely unsettling. Singing the wrong song. He glanced at the watch again. 12 Gakinane, precisely. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Tower has cleared us for takeoff." Alistair leaned back, closing his eyes, dismissing the child as an insignificant anomaly. He had a schedule to keep. That was when the second tremor hit, far more violent this time. A gut-wrenching lurch, not from the plane, but from the world outside. Through the window, he saw it. The top 20 floors of his own building, the brand-new Finch Tower 2 miles away, where a pre-launch party for 200 VIPs was being held on the observation deck, buckled inward with a silent, horrifying grace before collapsing into a plume of dust and smoke. Alistair's blood ran cold. The structural integrity test, the final sonic stress simulation. It had been scheduled for precisely noon. His watch still read a perfect 12:03. But the tower had collapsed a full 13 seconds early. 13 seconds. That was the exact margin by which he would have been in the air, unreachable, unaware. 13 seconds that had just saved his life, but damned 200 others. Or had it? A frantic call came through to the cockpit. The sonic test had been triggered early by a system glitch. The observation deck had been evacuated just seconds before the collapse, thanks to an anonymous emergency call. A child's voice, the fire chief said, babbling something about a ticking clock singing the wrong song. Alistair Finch's world, a fortress built on the bedrock of precision and control, crumbled in that instant. His gaze fell upon his perfect, priceless watch, and for the first time in his life he was forced to consider the impossible. The little girl had been right. His watch was wrong. And those 5 words, spoken from a place of impossible knowledge, had just performed a miracle. The silence that followed the pilot's relayed message was absolute. The background hum of the avionics, the distant voice from air traffic control, Alistair's own frantic heartbeat. It all faded into a roaring quiet. The image of his tower, the gleaming monument to his ambition and success, its magnificent spire now a jagged tooth against the skyline, was seared into his mind. He had built an empire on the principle of time. Time was money. Time was power. Time was the only currency that could not be cheated. And his watch, the Eleanor chronometer, was the high priest of his religion. It wasn't merely a timepiece. It was a promise, a physical manifestation of the order he had imposed on the chaos of the world after his wife, Eleanor, and their daughter, Sophie, had been taken from him in an instant of shattered glass and twisted metal, an accident caused by a drunk driver who had run a red light by 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Since that day, Alistair had waged a war against imprecision. His life became a fortress of schedules, its walls built of minutes and seconds. And now, a smudge-faced child in a tattered dress had breached those walls with a whispered absurdity. It's singing the wrong song. The phrase was meaningless, childish fantasy. Yet 200 people were alive because of it. The structural test had been scheduled for noon, a time chosen by him for its symbolic resonance, the zenith of the day for the zenith of his achievements. The automated system was linked to the atomic clock. It could not have been early. It was impossible, unless the clock itself was wrong. "Get me the head of my engineering department." Alistair snapped at his flight attendant, his voice emerging from his paralysis, sharp and brittle. "And find out who was cleaning this aircraft. I want the name of the woman and her child. I want to know where they live. I want to know everything." The flight attendant, a young woman named Clara, nodded, her face pale. She had seen the tower collapse too. The entire crew was shaken. The trip to Tokyo was, of course, canceled. Within minutes, Alistair was striding across the tarmac, the acrid smell of jet fuel replaced by the distant, horrifying scent of dust and something burning. He ignored the concerned questions of his pilot and the airport officials rushing to meet him. He was a man possessed by a single, maddening question. He went directly to his office on the 23rd floor of his old building, a space that now had an obscene, panoramic view of his new building's ruin. His chief engineer, a man named Henderson, was already there, his face ashen. "What happened?" Alistair demanded, forgoing any greeting. "We don't know, sir," Henderson stammered. "The system activated at 11:59:47, 13 seconds early. It's impossible. It's tied directly to the global time signal." "Check the signal. Check the receivers. Check every line of code," Alistair commanded, his voice dangerously low. "Find the impossibility." He turned to his head of security, a former federal agent named Morrison. "The anonymous call. What did they find?" "Came from a payphone 3 blocks from the tower. A witness saw a little girl use it right around that time. She was gone by the time the first responders got there. No prints, no one recognized her." "Find her," Alistair said. He held up his wrist, displaying the Eleanor. "This watch, my late wife's design, is a sister to the master clock in the tower. They share a proprietary resonance escapement. If one is off, the other would be too." It was a lie, a shot in the dark, but it was the only thread he could grasp. "The girl said my watch was wrong. Find out how she knew." For the next 48 hours, Alistair did not sleep. He lived in his office, fueled by black coffee and a cold, burning rage against the illogical. He watched news reports of the miracle on Fifth Avenue interviews with weeping survivors who had been rushed off the observation deck by frantic security guards acting on the anonymous tip. He listened to the recording of the call over and over. A small, breathless voice. "The big clock is singing wrong. It's going to make the building fall down. You have to tell them." A click, then the dial tone. Meanwhile, a small army of his employees descended on the private airfield. They questioned every staff member. The cleaning crew, managed by a contractor, was grilled for hours. A woman named Maria Vargas, a single mother, had been on duty that day. She had a daughter, Lily, 7 years old. When questioned, Maria was terrified. She swore her daughter had been with her the entire time, in the staff break room. She had never been near Alistair Finch's jet. She was a good girl. She would never wander off. Maria's fear was so palpable that even Morrison, a man trained to detect deception, was almost convinced. But there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a desperate protective instinct that told him she was lying. On the third day, Henderson came back with a report that made the hair on Alistair's neck stand up. "We found it," the engineer said, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "It's not the atomic clock, it's the receiver. Under a unique combination of atmospheric pressure and solar flare activity, a harmonic resonance is created. It happens for less than 90 seconds once every 4 or 5 years. During that window, it can cause the quartz crystal in the receiver to oscillate just slightly faster. It would throw the clock off by a handful of seconds." Alistair stared at him. "And this unique combination, when did it occur?" Henderson swallowed. "It started at approximately 11:58 a.m. on the day of the collapse. No one could have predicted it, Mr. Finch. It's a 1 in a billion anomaly. A ghost in the machine." A ghost. A song. Alistair felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He looked at the Eleanor on his wrist. It was a purely mechanical device, a marvel of springs and gears, not quartz crystals. It should have been immune. He had to have it tested. He sent for the finest horologist in the city, an old Swiss man named Mr. Dubois, who had been Eleanor's contemporary. While he waited, he reviewed the file Morrison had compiled on Maria and Lily Vargas. They lived in a run-down tenement in a forgotten corner of the city. Maria worked 2 jobs. Lily was a quiet, solitary child, according to her teachers. Excelled at mathematics and art. She spent her free time drawing or taking apart old, broken things to see how they worked. There was a grandfather, deceased, who had been a watchmaker, a man named Elias Vance. The name meant nothing to Alistair. Mr. Dubois arrived that afternoon. He handled the Eleanor with the reverence of a priest handling a holy relic. For hours he worked under a magnifying loupe, his face a mask of concentration. Finally he looked up, his expression bewildered. "It is a masterpiece, Monsieur Finch," he said, his accent thick. "Truly, your late wife was a genius. The escapement, it is a thing of beauty. And yet—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "And yet what?" Alistair pressed. "There is an imperfection. So small, it is almost theoretical. Here," he pointed with a pair of tweezers to a minuscule gear, no bigger than a pinhead. "The pallet jewel. It is angled by a fraction of a micron. It would have no effect on the timekeeping under normal circumstances, but if the watch were subjected to a very specific, sustained, low-frequency vibration. Like the spooling engines of a Gulf Stream jet?" Alistair finished for him. "Précisément," Dubois confirmed. "During that vibration, this tiny imperfection would cause the balance wheel to oscillate infinitesimally faster. It would gain, perhaps, 1 second every 4 or 5 seconds. It is a flaw so subtle, so specific, only the person who designed it would ever know it was there. It is almost like a signature. Alistair stared at the watch, his mind reeling. A signature, a deliberate flaw. He felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. He thanked Dubois, his mind already miles away. He picked up the file on Lily Vargas. Elias Vance, watchmaker. He buzzed his secretary. Get me everything you can find on a watchmaker named Elias Vance. I want patent filings, business records, old advertisements, everything. Then he looked at Morrison. We're going to pay a visit to the Vargas family. He strode out of the office, the Eleanor on his wrist no longer feeling like a symbol of perfection, but like a ticking mystery he had to solve. It was time to find the little girl who could hear the secrets of a machine. The tenement building smelled of damp plaster, boiled cabbage, and quiet desperation. It was a world away from the sterile, climate-controlled corridors of Alistair's life. He followed Morrison up 3 flights of rickety stairs, the sound of their expensive leather shoes echoing in the gloom. The door to apartment 3B was scarred with peeling paint. Morrison knocked. It opened a few inches, held by a brass chain. Maria Vargas's face appeared in the gap, her eyes wide with fear when she saw them. I told you everything, she said, her voice trembling. My Lily, she did nothing. We just want to talk to her, Mrs. Vargas, Alistair said, his tone softer than he intended. She is just a little girl. Please, I will lose my job. You won't lose your job, Alistair assured her, a promise he made with the casual authority of a man who could hire and fire thousands with a single word. I just need to ask her a question. Reluctantly, Maria slid the chain and opened the door. The apartment was tiny, but immaculately clean. A threadbare sofa, a small table with 2 chairs, and in the corner, a child's workspace. The floor around a small rug was a chaos of springs, gears, broken music boxes, and old clocks. In the center of it sat Lily, a jeweler's loop pressed to her eye, her small fingers carefully reassembling the guts of a tarnished pocket watch. She didn't look up when they entered, completely absorbed in her task. Lily, her mother said softly, these men want to talk to you. Lily slowly lowered the loop. Her eyes, the same intelligent, assessing gaze he'd seen on the jet, fixed on Alistair. She wasn't afraid, just wary. Alistair knelt, bringing himself down to her level. The unfamiliar posture felt awkward, foreign. He held out his wrist. This watch, he began. You said it was wrong. How did you know? Lily looked at the Eleanor, her head tilted. It sings too fast, she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Most clocks, they sing a steady song. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Yours sings tick-tock, tick-tock. The second tock is in a hurry. She looked at him. Grandpa taught me how to listen. Your grandfather, Elias Vance? Lily nodded. He said all machines have a voice. You just have to be quiet enough to hear them. She picked up the pocket watch she was working on and held it to Alistair's ear. It was silent. This one's voice is sleeping, she whispered. I'm trying to wake it up. Alistair felt an uncanny chill. He looked around at the mechanical debris, the intricate, half-finished projects. His secretary had delivered the file on Elias Vance just before he'd left. It was thin. Vance had been a brilliant, but commercially unsuccessful, independent horologist. He held a few minor patents from decades ago. He had died 2 years prior, penniless. There was one other note, a piece of industry gossip from an old trade journal. For a time, Vance had been a mentor to a promising young designer, a woman named Eleanor Finch. Alistair's breath caught in his throat. Eleanor. His Eleanor. She had never mentioned him. He looked at Lily, at her intense focus, her preternatural understanding of the mechanical world. He was looking at a legacy. "Your grandfather," Alistair said, his voice strained. "Did he ever talk about the watches he made? Did he ever talk about a signature?" Lily's face lit up. "The ghost note!" she exclaimed. "He said it was his secret, a tiny little wheel that wasn't perfect. He said it was to remind people that nothing man made is ever truly perfect. Only God can be perfect. He said it made the clock have a soul. The ghost note. A deliberate flaw." The words of Mr. Dubois echoed in his mind. "It is almost like a signature." His wife had put her mentor's secret signature into her greatest creation, a tribute he had never known about. But why had she never spoken of him? "Lily," Alistair asked, his heart pounding, "do you have anything your grandfather made? Anything at all?" Lily scrambled to a small wooden chest in the corner and pulled out a velvet roll. She unrolled it on the floor. Inside were half a dozen exquisite, unique timepieces. They were not finished watches, but complex, uncased movements, marvels of microengineering. One of them, a tourbillon with a triple-axis escapement, was a design so advanced, so impossibly intricate, that Alistair had only ever seen it in theoretical journals. And sitting right next to it was a design that made his blood run cold. It was an early, hand-wrought prototype of the resonance escapement used in the Eleanor. It was cruder, less refined, but the core principle was identical. The patent for that design was held by Finch Industries. It was the patent that had launched Eleanor's career, the one that had made her a star in the horological world, the one that had made his company millions. But it wasn't her design. She had improved upon it, perfected it, but the soul of it, the genius spark, had come from Elias Vance. "My grandpa said this was his best idea," Lily said, pointing to the prototype. "He said someone stole it." The word hung in the air, heavy and damning. Stolen. Alistair stood up, his mind a maelstrom of confusion, guilt, and a dawning, terrible understanding. He looked from the brilliant, stolen mechanism on the floor to the innocent face of its creator's granddaughter. The debt he owed this child was no longer just for saving his life. It was for the very foundation of his success. As he stood there, his phone buzzed. It was his secretary. "Sir, I found something else on Elias Vance. It's a record of a lawsuit, a patent dispute from 25 years ago. Vance sued a man named Marcus Thorne for stealing several of his designs. Vance lost the case. He was bankrupted by the legal fees." Marcus Thorne. The name was a thunderclap. Thorne was the CEO of Kronos Corp., Alistair's most hated rival, the man he was supposed to be meeting in Tokyo. The merger was a hostile takeover, a final move to crush Thorne and his company once and for all. Suddenly, the fractured pieces of the past snapped into a horrifyingly clear picture. Thorne hadn't just been his business rival. He had been the man who destroyed Eleanor's mentor. And his wife, brilliant, proud Eleanor, had lived with that secret, that guilt, her entire life. She had tried to honor her teacher by embedding his secret signature in her work, a message in a bottle that only now, years after her death, had finally washed ashore. Alistair looked at Lily, who was carefully rolling up her grandfather's treasures. The little girl, who could hear the ghost in the machine, had not just saved 200 lives. She had unearthed a ghost from his own past, a story of theft and injustice that demanded a reckoning. His war with Marcus Thorne was no longer about business. It was about a debt that had come due. It was about justice for Elias Vance. The drive back to his sterile penthouse was a blur. Alistair sat in the back of his limousine, the city lights sliding past the tinted windows. But he saw nothing. He saw only Eleanor's face, her smile tinged with a sadness he had never understood. He saw a brilliant old man dying in poverty, his genius stolen and sold to the highest bidder. He saw a little girl with old eyes, taking apart broken things to find their sleeping voices. He had built his life on a lie, a beautiful, intricate, profitable lie, but a lie nonetheless. The realization was a cancer, eating away at the foundations of his identity. He, Alistair Finch, the titan of industry, the man of unwavering principles, was a fraud. His success, his tower, his legacy, all of it was tainted by the ghost of Elias Vance. When he arrived home, he went straight to his safe. He pulled out Eleanor's old design journals, leather-bound books filled with her elegant handwriting and precise, beautiful schematics. He had never been able to bring himself to look through them since her death. The pain was too great. Now he opened them with trembling hands. He found it in a journal from the year before they were married, a series of drawings for the residence escapement, and tucked into a flap at the back of the book was a faded, yellowed letter. It was from Elias. "My dearest Eleanor," the letter began, "Thorne has won. The courts have sided with him. They say my designs are his. He has taken everything, but he cannot take the knowledge in my head or the love I have for you, my brightest student. I am releasing you from your apprenticeship. A man in my position can only drag you down. Go to Finch. He is a good man, if a bit obsessed with straight lines. He will give you the resources you need. Do not fight for me. It is a battle you cannot win. Just promise me one thing. Never forget that a machine without a soul is just a collection of gears. Put a soul in your work. Let it sing a true song. Your friend, Elias." A single dried tear had smudged the ink of the signature. Alistair closed his eyes, the weight of Eleanor's secret crushing him. She hadn't told him because she was trying to protect him and to honor Elias's wish. She had carried this burden alone. Her entire career, her greatest achievement, had been both a triumph and a tragedy, a monument built on a foundation of guilt. A cold, hard fury began to replace Alistair's grief, a fury directed at Marcus Thorne. This wasn't just about a stolen patent anymore. Thorne had destroyed a good man. He had forced Eleanor into a life of silent compromise. He had cast a shadow over everything Alistair held sacred. His phone rang, piercing the quiet of the penthouse. It was Morrison. "Sir, we have a problem. Thorne got wind of your visit to the Vargas family. He's making a move." "What kind of move?" Alistair asked, his voice dangerously calm. "He's filed a report with Child Protective Services. An anonymous tip. He's claiming Lily Vargas is in an unsafe environment, that her mother is neglectful. They're planning to take the child into custody in the morning." The line went silent for a moment. Alistair understood immediately. It was a threat. Thorne knew that Lily and her grandfather's work were somehow important to Alistair. He was taking the girl as a hostage, a pawn in their corporate war. He was using the same brutal, underhanded tactics he had used to destroy Elias Vance. He was trying to take the last living piece of the old watchmaker's legacy. "That's not going to happen," Alistair said, a core of steel in his voice. "Get the car ready, and get my legal team on the phone. All of them. Tell them to meet me at my office in 1 hour. The war with Kronos Corp just went public." He hung up and walked to the window, looking out over the glittering, indifferent city. His fight with Thorne had always been a game, a complex chess match of mergers and acquisitions. But Thorne had just made it personal. He had threatened a child. He had threatened his child. For in some strange, profound way, Alistair already felt a fierce, protective ownership of Lily. She was the keeper of his wife's secret, the key to a past he had to set right. He looked at the Eleanor on his wrist. It was no longer just a watch. It was a weapon. Its secret flaw, the ghost note, the very thing that had saved his life, was about to become the instrument of Marcus Thorne's destruction. Elias Vance had put a soul into his work. And Alistair was about to discover that a soul, even the ghost of one, could be a very powerful thing indeed. The law offices of Finch Industries at 2 in the morning were a hive of controlled chaos. A dozen of the city's sharpest legal minds, roused from their beds by Alistair's summons, huddled over conference tables, fueled by coffee and fear. Alistair paced before them like a caged panther, laying out his strategy. "Forget the Tokyo merger," he began, his voice cutting through their sleepy protests. "This is no longer about acquisition. This is about annihilation. I want you to find every piece of dirt we have on Marcus Thorne and Kronos Corp. Every questionable deal, every safety violation, every disgruntled former employee. But most importantly," he paused, letting his words sink in, "I want a complete history of his patent filings, going back 30 years. While his legal team dug into Thorne's past, Alistair made a call to the head of the city's most powerful public relations firm. "I'm calling in that favor you owe me," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I want a story ready to drop on every major news network by sunrise. The headline will be, 'Corporate Titan Adopts Founder's Granddaughter, Exposes Decades of Fraud.'" Then he and Morrison paid another visit to the small apartment in the forgotten corner of the city. Maria Vargas opened the door, her face a mask of terror. "They came," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The social workers. They said they are coming back in the morning with a court order to take Lily." "They won't be taking her," Alistair said, his voice a calm reassurance in the storm of her fear. "Mrs. Vargas, Maria, I need you and Lily to come with me. Right now. You'll be staying in my guest suite. You will be safe there." Maria hesitated, her distrust of this powerful, unpredictable man warring with her maternal instinct to protect her child. Lily emerged from the bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes, clutching an old, disassembled alarm clock. She looked at Alistair, not with fear, but with her usual quiet curiosity. "Is the man with the loud watch coming?" she asked. Alistair was momentarily confused. "The man who was on the television," Lily clarified. "His watch is all wrong. It doesn't sing. It shouts. It's angry." Alistair looked at Morrison, who immediately understood. He pulled out his phone and found a recent news clip of Marcus Thorne. There, on Thorne's wrist, was a garish, oversized gold watch, a signature piece he was famous for wearing, a Kronos Corp original. "Lily," Alistair knelt again, the motion feeling more natural this time. "What is wrong with his watch?" "It's too loud," she said, wrinkling her nose. "The gears grind." "Like they don't fit." Grandpa said that's the sound of a bad heart. A machine made with no love. A machine made with no love. Alistair felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. He looked at Maria. Your husband, Lily's father. What happened to him? Maria's face hardened. He left when Lily was a baby. He said he couldn't live with the ghost of her grandfather. He said Elias's obsession with his work, with his stolen legacy, had poisoned our family. So Thorne hadn't just destroyed Elias. He had destroyed his family, too. The debt was deeper than Alistair had imagined. Maria, Alistair said, his voice earnest, I cannot fix the past, but I can offer you and Lily a future, a safe one. Please, trust me. Perhaps it was the desperation in her own heart, or perhaps it was the quiet trust in her daughter's eyes as she looked at Alistair, but Maria nodded. Within the hour, they were gone, leaving the shabby apartment behind. They were installed in a luxurious guest suite in Alistair's penthouse, a world of soft carpets and quiet comfort they had never known. For the first time in her life, Lily had her own room, with a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. As dawn broke, Alistair's strategy began to unfold. The news story hit the morning shows like a bombshell. It told a carefully crafted, but essentially true, story. How the brilliant but naive Elias Vance had been robbed by his ruthless competitor, Marcus Thorne. How Finch Industries' own success was unknowingly tied to this historic injustice through Alistair's late wife. And how, in a twist of fate, Alistair had discovered the truth through Vance's 7-year-old granddaughter, a prodigy with a unique gift. The story painted Alistair not as a corporate raider, but as a man seeking to right a terrible wrong. It was a masterpiece of narrative warfare. The stock market opened, and Kronos Corp's shares immediately went into a nosedive. Thorne was besieged by reporters. His anonymous tip to Child Protective Services was exposed for what it was, a cruel and cynical tactic to intimidate a competitor. The agency immediately dropped its case against Maria Vargas, but Alistair knew this was just the first move. The real checkmate would be the proof. His legal team had worked through the night and found it, a series of patent filings by Thorne that were submitted just days after documented meetings with Elias Vance. On their own, they were circumstantial. But Alistair had an ace up his sleeve. He had Lily. He arranged an emergency meeting of the International Horological Guild, the governing body of the watchmaking world. It was an unprecedented move, but his influence and the brewing scandal was so great that they agreed. The meeting was set for the following day in Geneva. Thorne, desperate to staunch the bleeding and defend his reputation, agreed to attend. Alistair, Maria, and Lily boarded his jet. This time, there were no vibrations, no hurried takeoffs. As they ascended into the calm, blue stratosphere, Alistair took out the velvet roll containing Elias Vance's prototypes. He laid them on the polished table. Lily, he said, I need you to show them. I need you to help them listen. Lily looked at the beautiful, complex machines her grandfather had made. Then she looked at Alistair, her small face serious. For Grandpa? She asked. Yes, Alistair said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. For Grandpa, and for Eleanor, he added silently to himself. For all of us. The chamber of the Horological Guild in Geneva was an old, wood-paneled room that smelled of history and old money. It was filled with the world's most respected watchmakers and industry leaders, men with stern faces and critical eyes. They sat around a long, imposing table. Marcus Thorne was at one end, his face a thunderous mask of rage. Alistair sat at the other, calm and composed. Between them, on the polished wood of the table, lay two velvet rolls. One held Elias Vance's prototypes. The other, brought by Thorne, held his own company's prized historical designs. "This is a farce," Thorne boomed, his voice echoing in the hushed room. "A publicity stunt by a man desperate to salvage a failing takeover bid. He is using a child to slander my name." The president of the guild, a severe-looking man named Jean-Luc, raised a hand. "Mr. Finch has made a serious accusation, Marcus, one that strikes at the honor of our profession. He deserves to be heard." Alistair stood. He didn't speak of business or patents. He spoke of art, of genius, of a man named Elias Vance who saw the soul in a machine. He unrolled the prototypes. A gasp went through the room as the assembled masters recognized the brilliance and originality of the designs. "These," Alistair said, his voice quiet but resonant, "are the work of Elias Vance. As you can see, they include an early version of the resonance escapement that my late wife, Eleanor Finch, later perfected." He then unrolled Thorne's collection, and as you can also see, they bear a remarkable resemblance to designs Mr. Thorne patented years ago. "Resemblance is not theft," Thorne shot back. "Great minds think alike." "Indeed," Alistair agreed smoothly. "But some minds have a unique voice. Gentlemen, I did not bring these mechanisms here for you to look at. I brought them here for you to listen to." He nodded to the doorway. Maria entered holding Lily's hand. The child was small and looked out of place in the grand room, but she walked with a quiet confidence. She went to the table and looked not at the men, but at the machines. "This is preposterous," Thorne sputtered. "You bring a child to this hearing?" "This child," Alistair said, his voice like ice, "can hear things you have been deaf to your entire life." He turned to Lily. "Lily, can you show these men what your grandfather taught you?" Lily nodded. She walked first to her grandfather's prototypes. She gently picked one up, a beautiful moon phase complication, and held it to her ear. She smiled. "This one sings about the moon and the stars," she said softly. She moved to the next one, the resonance escapement. "This one has the ghost note," she whispered, her eyes shining. "It sings a secret song." Then she walked to Thorne's side of the table. She picked up his prized first chronograph, the watch that had launched his company. She held it to her ear, and her small face wrinkled in distaste. "This one is shouting," she said. "The parts are fighting. It's an angry sound." A few of the old watchmakers, men who had spent their lives with these tiny mechanisms, leaned forward, intrigued. They had all spoken of a watch having a feel or a character, but they had always meant it as a metaphor. "Now for the final piece of evidence," Alistair announced. He placed the Eleanor on the table, and beside it he placed another watch, one his legal team had acquired overnight at an exorbitant price from a private collector. It was one of the first watches Thorne had ever produced, based on the patents he had allegedly stolen from Vance. "Lily," Alistair said, "tell us what you hear." Lily picked up the Eleanor first. She held it to her ear, a look of profound recognition on her face. "It's like Grandpa's," she said. "It has the ghost note, but the song is sadder, like it misses him." Alistair felt a lump form in his throat. Eleanor's guilt, embedded in the very heart of the machine. Then Lily picked up Thorne's watch. She listened for a long moment, her head tilted. "This one is a liar," she said, her voice clear and certain. She looked directly at Marcus Thorne. It's trying to sing Grandpa's song, but it doesn't know the words. It has the ghost note, but it's in the wrong place. It's broken. It makes the whole song hurt." A stunned silence filled the room. The old masters looked at each other. They understood what she was saying. A copyist could replicate a design, but they could not replicate the soul, the deep, intuitive understanding of the master. Thorne had copied the signature flaw, the ghost note, but he hadn't understood its mechanical purpose. He had put it in the wrong place, creating a discordant tell that only a true prodigy, or the master himself, could ever perceive. Jean-Luc, the guild president, slowly reached for Thorne's watch. He unscrewed the back with a jeweler's tool and placed it under a powerful table-mounted microscope. The other masters crowded around. They saw it instantly. The misplaced pallet jewel. The subtle, fatal error that proved it was a copy, not an original concept. It was the horological equivalent of a forged signature. Thorne's face went white. He looked at Lily, at this impossible child who had just unraveled his life's lie with her ears. Jean-Luc looked up, his face grim. "Marcus," he said, his voice heavy with judgment, "you have disgraced us all." It was over. The verdict was silent, but absolute. Thorne was ruined, not by stock prices or legal maneuvering, but by the ghost of a man he had wronged, and the uncanny gift of his granddaughter. Alistair walked over to Lily and knelt before her. He didn't say a word. He simply held out his arms. She ran into them, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her tight, this little girl, who had saved him in more ways than he could count. He had come here to win a war, but he realized now that he had won something far more valuable. He had found a family. In the months that followed, the world shifted. Marcus Thorne, disgraced and stripped of his honors, saw his company collapse and was ultimately consumed by Finch Industries. But Alistair's victory felt hollow. The real work was just beginning. He established the Vance Finch Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting young, independent artisans and inventors, ensuring that no genius like Elias Vance would ever be crushed by the system again. He made sure Elias's name was restored to the patents he had created, giving him the credit he had been denied in life. Maria Vargas, no longer a cleaner, was put in charge of a community outreach program for the foundation, her compassion and strength, now assets in helping others. Lily was enrolled in the city's finest school for gifted children, her unique talents, nurtured by the best tutors Alistair could find. But their real life was not in boardrooms or schools. It was in the new workshop Alistair had built in his penthouse. It was a wonderland of glass and steel, filled with lathes, polishing machines, and every conceivable tool a watchmaker could desire. In the center was a large workbench, one side holding Alistair's tools, the other a smaller set for Lily. They spent their evenings there. He was no longer a CEO, obsessed with schedules. He was a man, rediscovering joy in the patient, precise work of creation. He was teaching Lily the craft, but more often than not, she was teaching him. She would close her eyes and listen to a new mechanism, her small hands, then finding a misaligned gear, or an unbalanced wheel that his eyes had missed. One evening, Lily looked up from a complex movement she was assembling. "Papa Alistair?" she asked, using the name she had chosen for him. "Yes, Lilybug," he answered, smiling. "Is my grandpa in heaven with your Eleanor?" Alistair paused, his file hovering over a tiny brass wheel. "I believe he is," he said softly. "I like to think they're up there together, designing clocks for the angels. Lily smiled. I think their clocks would sing the prettiest songs. Alistair looked at the Eleanor chronometer, which now sat in a place of honor, on a velvet stand on the workbench. He rarely wore it anymore. He no longer needed a perfect clock to command his life. His days were now measured not in seconds, but in moments, in the shared laughter over a misplaced gear, in the quiet concentration of working side by side, in the warmth of a small hand slipping into his. The watch was a reminder, not of order, but of the beautiful, flawed, and unpredictable nature of life. It was a reminder of two brilliant minds, of a terrible injustice, and of the little girl who could hear the ghost in the machine, and in doing so had taught a broken man how to hear the music in his own soul again. She had saved his life, but he knew, with a certainty that resonated deeper than any clock's chime, that she had also saved him from a life that was no longer worth living. He had found his own ghost note, the beautiful imperfection that made everything whole. This story teaches us a powerful lesson. It shows that integrity and truth, like the precise gears of a master timepiece, will eventually align, no matter how long they have been disturbed. It reminds us that our true legacy is not in the empires we build, but in the lives we touch and the wrongs we are brave enough to right. Lily, with her innocent gift, and Alistair, with his newfound purpose, show us that listening with our hearts can reveal truths that our eyes and ears might miss. If their journey from loss to a new kind of family moved you, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who believes in second chances. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us of the quiet power of kindness and the enduring strength of the human spirit.